Centuries ago, there was a race unlike any other, strong, honorable, and feared across the stars. They stood united, bound by a code of conduct that valued strength and loyalty above all else. Their name commanded respect in every corner of the galaxy. And at the heart of this powerful civilization was their champion, Rylok. Rylok wasn't just any warrior. He was the embodiment of everything his people stood for. His presence on the battlefield sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned enemies. It wasn't just his raw physical strength that made him a legend, but his unwavering sense of duty and honor. In every battle, he led his people to victory, carving out their place as one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. But even the greatest legends are not immune to the cruelty of fate. On the eve of their most crucial battle, Rylok vanished. No one knew what had happened to him. One moment he was preparing to lead his people into battle, and the next, he was gone, without a trace. His disappearance shook his people to their core. Without their champion, they faltered. What was supposed to be their defining victory turned into a catastrophic defeat. With Rylok gone, their enemies exploited their confusion, striking with relentless force. The alien race, once proud and mighty, began to crumble. They couldn't recover from the blow of losing their greatest warrior. Every battle after that seemed harder than the last. The confidence that had once defined them faded, replaced by fear and doubt. They tried to fight, but without Rylok they were lost. Their enemies grew bolder, attacking with renewed vigor. The galaxy, once so respectful of their power, now saw them as vulnerable. As the years turned into centuries, their society fragmented. No one spoke openly about what had happened to Rylok, but the whispers never stopped. Some said he had fled in fear, while others believed he had been betrayed from within. Whatever the truth, the shame of losing him hung heavy over their civilization. Attempts to choose a new champion were met with failure. No one could live up to Rylok's legacy. In their minds, he had been irreplaceable. And so, they stopped trying. The alien race, once conquerors, scattered across the stars, their former glory reduced to little more than a distant memory. The mighty had fallen, and in their place was a fractured, disillusioned people who had lost not only their champion but their sense of purpose. With every passing generation, the legend of Rylok grew more distant, more myth than reality. Stories were passed down in hushed tones, but they held no real meaning anymore. They were the tales of a people who had once been great but were now forgotten, left behind by a galaxy that had moved on without them. It wasn't just the loss of Rylok that had destroyed them, it was the loss of hope. No one dared dream of a future where they could be strong again. Their time had passed, and with it, the belief that they could ever rise again. And so, they drifted. Without purpose, without strength, without hope. Until the humans arrived. The humans had always been different. Where other species looked to the past and saw only ruins, humanity saw opportunity. It wasn't long after their alliance with the remnants of the alien species that they began digging into the scattered fragments of their lost history. What they found intrigued them. Among the many stories and relics was a name that stood out, Rylok, a champion who had once led an empire. To the humans, this wasn't just a forgotten tale, it was something worth investigating. The more they learned about Rylok, the more they became fascinated by the idea of him. They pored over ancient texts, broken records, and half-destroyed artifacts. The alien species, though reluctant at first, gradually opened up, offering what little knowledge they still possessed about their fallen champion. Some of the older generations scoffed at the humans' obsession, dismissing Rylok as a ghost of the past, a figure whose legacy had died along with their glory. But the humans weren't deterred. They saw something different in Rylok's story, a possibility, a spark that could reignite something greater. Then they uncovered the legend of the vault. Buried deep in the ruins of an ancient city, far from the inhabited zones, there were whispers of a place where Rylok might have been preserved. The idea seemed ludicrous at first. How could a warrior lost for centuries still exist? But the humans knew that in a universe as vast and mysterious as theirs, stranger things had happened. They had seen civilizations rise and fall, had encountered technologies that defied explanation. The notion that Rylok could still be out there, frozen in time, wasn't beyond the realm of possibility. A team of human explorers, led by their most determined researchers and soldiers, decided to find out for themselves. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't wait for the alien race to give them their blessing. They simply acted, driven by their own sense of curiosity and a belief that the past could still shape the future. The journey was treacherous. The ruins were a testament to the alien civilization's former grandeur, but they were also dangerous, filled with decayed structures, unstable ground, and remnants of defensive systems long since abandoned. The humans pressed on, undeterred by the challenges. They had faced worse. They had always pushed forward, even when the odds were stacked against them. It was just their way. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, the air grew thicker, the tension palpable. They had heard stories of those who had tried to enter these ruins before. None had returned. But where others had failed, the humans persevered. They followed the clues left in ancient carvings, deciphering forgotten languages, and navigating through traps that had been dormant for centuries. Days turned into weeks, and just when it seemed like they might be chasing nothing more than a myth, they found it, a massive underground chamber, sealed off by a technology far more advanced than anything they had encountered before. The vault, hidden away for so long, was real. With cautious precision, they began the process of opening the vault. This was no ordinary piece of technology. It was a work of art, a complex system designed to preserve whatever was inside. The air was thick with anticipation. If Rylock was in there, it would be the discovery of a lifetime, a chance to revive not just a warrior but an entire legacy. Finally, after hours of careful manipulation, the vault hissed open. Cold air rushed out, and inside, bathed in a pale blue light, was Rylock. He wasn't dead. He had been preserved, frozen in time, just as the legend had said. The humans had found him. But their victory was short-lived. As they revived him, the humans quickly realized that this wasn't the triumphant return they had imagined. Rylock, the once mighty champion, was not the same warrior they had read about in the legends. He was angry, disoriented, and filled with bitterness. His first words were not of gratitude but of rage. He had been betrayed, and now, after centuries of slumber, he had no interest in fighting again. The humans tried to reason with him, explaining why they had revived him, sharing stories of the alien race's decline and the galaxy's current state. They spoke of the potential for him to lead once more, to restore his people to their former glory. But Rylock was unmoved. In his eyes, his people had failed him. They had abandoned him when he was needed most, and now, after so much time had passed, he saw no reason to fight for them again. To him, honor had died long ago, buried along with the civilization that had once stood proudly behind him. The humans, undeterred, pressed on. They spoke of their own struggles, of how humanity had faced countless challenges throughout their history. They had survived wars, plagues, and near extinction, not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they had never given up. They told Rylock that strength wasn't just about physical power, it was about the will to fight, to endure, even when all seemed lost. Rylock listened, but the fire that had once driven him was gone. He had spent too long in the darkness, too long trapped in a state of despair. The humans, for all their passion and conviction, could not reignite the spark that had made him a champion. At least, not yet. Rylock had been revived, but it was clear that he wasn't the warrior they had hoped to bring back. His bitterness ran deep, and no matter how hard the humans tried to appeal to him, the champion they needed seemed lost. He sat in silence most of the time, a hulking figure who stared into the distance, refusing to engage with anyone. The humans could see the toll of betrayal etched into his every movement. They didn't give up, though. They refused to. Instead of pushing him to fight, they simply stayed with him. They shared their stories, their experiences, and their struggles, not to persuade him, but because they felt it was important for him to understand what had happened in his absence. They talked about their history, how they had survived when they were outnumbered and outmatched, how humanity had clawed its way from near destruction time and time again. It wasn't just words that they offered, though. They didn't just tell Rylock about their strength, they showed him. Despite knowing that the alien species had abandoned Rylak, the humans took it upon themselves to begin repairs on the alien ruins. They believed that if there was any chance of restoring this civilization, it had to start with them, even if the aliens themselves had lost all hope. They rebuilt crumbling structures, repaired forgotten technology, and unearthed more pieces of the alien race's history. Rylak watched them work tirelessly, despite the dangers and despite the fact that this was not their world. At first, he showed no reaction. But something in him stirred. These humans, so fragile in comparison to his own people, worked with a kind of determination he hadn't seen in centuries. They didn't stop when the task seemed impossible. They didn't stop when things went wrong. They didn't even stop when it became clear that none of the aliens were interested in what they were doing. It confused him. He had been taught that strength was everything, that power was what made a species great. But these humans were weak by his standards, and yet they had the one thing that his people had lost long ago, the will to keep going, even when the cause seemed lost. One night Rylak spoke. "Why do you do this?" he asked, his voice rough from years of silence. "Why do you care so much about a people who abandoned their own champion?" The leader of the human explorers, a quiet but determined woman named Carter, looked at him and shrugged. "Because giving up isn't in our nature. We've been in worse situations, and we've survived because we didn't stop fighting when the odds were against us. Your people may have given up on you, but that doesn't mean you have to give up on them. Or yourself?" Rylak said nothing in response, but something in her words struck a chord. He had spent so long being angry, so long feeling betrayed, that he had forgotten what it felt like to believe in something. To fight for something bigger than himself. Watching these humans, he began to see something familiar, something he thought he'd lost forever. They reminded him of the warriors he had once led into battle. The ones who had fought beside him, not because they were the strongest, but because they believed in what they were fighting for. Still, doubt lingered. His people had left him to rot in that vault. Why should he care about them now? They had given up on honor, on everything they once stood for. The shame of their downfall weighed heavily on his mind. Then, the humans showed him something he hadn't expected. They weren't just rebuilding the ruins. They were preparing for something much bigger. A threat was coming. Something far worse than the battles of his past. The galaxy had become a darker, more dangerous place while he had been frozen in time. And humanity, fragile as they were, stood on the front lines. The humans didn't ask for his help. They didn't expect him to fight for them. They simply kept working, preparing themselves for the coming storm. Their courage, their tenacity, it reminded him of the way he used to be. Before the betrayal. Before the loss. As the days went on, Rylak found himself watching them more closely. These weren't warriors in the traditional sense, but they were something more. They were survivors. And in them, he began to see the faintest echoes of what his people had once been. Honor wasn't just about strength, it was about standing up for something, even when the odds were against you. Slowly, something shifted within him. It wasn't a sudden change, but a quiet realization that had been building over time. The humans, without knowing it, had reignited something in him that had long been dormant. They had reminded him that being a champion wasn't just about winning battles, it was about having something to fight for. Something worth defending. One evening, as the humans gathered around their camp, discussing their next steps and preparing for the incoming threat, Rylak stood up from where he had been sitting in silence. He walked over to them, towering over their group. They fell quiet, unsure of what to expect. "I will fight," he said, his voice steady but filled with a newfound resolve. "Not for my people. They are gone. But for you, for what you stand for. You remind me of a time when I still believed in something greater than myself." The humans exchanged glances, surprised but grateful. They hadn't expected him to come around, but they had hoped. And now, they had their answer. Rylak was no longer the champion of a fallen civilization. He was something else now. He was a warrior who had found a new cause, a new people worth fighting for. The legend of Rylak wasn't over. It had just been waiting for the right moment to be revived. And with the humans by his side, he was ready to fight once again. The galaxy was changing. The humans had seen it coming, and so had many other civilizations, though most were too afraid or too fractured to do anything about it. A new enemy, one far more ruthless than any in recent memory, had emerged from the fringes of the known universe. It consumed everything in its path, planets, fleets, entire civilizations, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. The threat was real, and it was closing in fast. Humanity, despite being relatively new to the galactic stage, had already earned a reputation for being unpredictable and relentless. They didn't have the advanced technology of other species, nor the centuries of experience in warfare, but what they had was a refusal to back down. They had prepared as best as they could, knowing full well that their survival might depend on the slimmest chance. They had no choice but to stand and fight, even though their forces were vastly outmatched. Rylok, now fully awake and watching the humans prepare for what was sure to be a brutal conflict, had made his decision. He would fight alongside them. But this time, it wasn't because he felt the weight of duty or the expectations of his people. He wasn't fighting for his own honor or legacy anymore. He was fighting for something much simpler, the belief that some things were worth defending, even in the face of impossible odds. When the enemy fleet finally arrived, it was as terrifying as the reports had suggested. Massive warships blotted out the stars, their weapons capable of tearing apart entire cities with a single shot. The humans were ready, though. Every ship, every soldier, every defensive measure they could muster was put into play. They knew this would be their hardest battle yet, but they also knew that they had something their enemies didn't: Rylok. Standing at the forefront of the human forces, Rylok looked out at the oncoming threat. The weight of the moment was not lost on him. For centuries, he had been a symbol of strength, and now, he was about to face a battle that would determine not just the future of humanity, but the legacy he had long thought lost. His people had abandoned him, but these humans, these fragile, determined humans, had reignited the fire within him. He owed them more than just his presence. He owed them everything he had left. The battle began with a fury that shook entire worlds. The enemy fleet unleashed a torrent of firepower, and the humans responded with everything they had. It was chaos, ships exploding in every direction, debris raining down on planets below, and the unmistakable scent of war hanging in the air. Rylok, armed with the weapons the humans had given him, charged into the heart of the conflict with a determination that could not be stopped. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for redemption. With every enemy he struck down, with every move he made, he proved to himself that he was still the warrior he had always been. The betrayal, the centuries of bitterness, all faded into the background as he focused on the task at hand. The humans fought alongside him, giving everything they had. Their resilience, their refusal to give in, pushed Rylok to fight even harder. He had thought that his people were the only ones capable of such strength, but the humans showed him that true strength came from the heart, not just from physical power. As the battle raged on, it became clear that the humans were holding their own. They were outnumbered, but their tactics, their ingenuity, and their sheer willpower kept them in the fight. Rylok led the charge, his presence on the battlefield inspiring not just the humans, but the scattered remnants of other alien species who had once called him a hero. Seeing him fight again, after so many centuries, gave them hope, a hope they had long thought dead. The enemy, relentless as they were, had not expected such fierce resistance. Their strategy was simple: overwhelm and destroy. But the humans, with Rylok at their side, had turned the tide. For every ship that fell, another rose to take its place. For every soldier lost, another stepped forward. And through it all, Rylok stood tall, a beacon of defiance in a galaxy that had forgotten what it meant to fight for something bigger than oneself. The turning point came when Rylok, in a moment of sheer audacity, led a strike directly into the heart of the enemy command ship. It was a move that no one saw coming, not even the humans. But Rylok knew that if they were going to win this fight, they had to cut the head off the snake. With a small team of human soldiers at his side, he breached the enemy's defenses and tore his way through their ranks with a ferocity that reminded everyone why he had once been called the greatest champion of his people. The final confrontation was brutal. Rylak stood face to face with the enemy commander, a being of immense power and malice. The two clashed in a battle that seemed to shake the very fabric of space itself. But in the end, it was Rylak who stood victorious, his enemy lying defeated at his feet. With the command ship destroyed and the enemy fleet in disarray, the humans seized the opportunity to strike back with everything they had. The enemy, now leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. The battle was won, but the cost had been high. Human ships lay in ruins, and many brave soldiers had fallen. But they had done it. They had survived. As the dust settled and the survivors began to assess the damage, Rylak stood silently among them. He had fought many battles in his lifetime, but this one felt different. It wasn't just a victory, it was a rebirth. He had fought not for his own people, but for humanity, a species that had shown him what it truly meant to stand together, to fight for something greater than oneself. In the aftermath, the humans looked to Rylak not as a relic of a forgotten past, but as a symbol of what they could achieve. He had become something more than just a legend, he had become a part of their story. And in that, Rylak found a peace he had never known before. He was no longer just the champion of a fallen race. He was a warrior who had found a new purpose, a new people worth fighting for. The humans had revived his legend, but it was Rylak who had truly been reborn.